Welcome to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. My name is Alice, and this week Matthew and I have another installment in our Listener Crit mini-series. We'll call it a mini-series. What happens in these episodes is that very brave, very generous souls send us their poems in draft, and we critique them on air as honestly as we can. We do not name the poets. It's an anonymous exercise. But even still, it's one that hypocritically I would not submit myself to because I'm scared. I'm scared of criticism. I just want everyone to say everything that I do is brilliant, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know if I'm bad. I'll figure it out very quietly myself. These two poets who sent us their work for today's episode are much braver than me. If you want to be part of an episode like this one, what you need to do is to sign up for the secret show. You can do that by going to SLEERICKETS.substack.com and pop in your email address. It's not an expensive thing to sign up for, and you get essentially another whole podcast. It's SLEERICKETS in the mirror world. It's all your favorite characters, but we're slightly more off book. And so if you do this, you can submit your poem for us to critique. We would love to have you as a member of the Secret Show family. So that's the first half of this episode, critiquing two poems by two very brave people. And then in the Secret Show, in the second half of this episode, Matthew and I attempt to answer a very smart, very interesting question from a listener about when it's a good idea to break the rules. And I think that conversation goes to some pretty interesting places. As always, I learned a lot. I have approximately 17,000 show notes here. There's a lot of follow-up reading that I need to do, including The Denial of Death by Sigmund Freud. Better get on that. I hope you enjoy both halves of this episode. I'll ramble on a little bit more at the end. But for now, enjoy Matthew and I going pretty hard, but I'm hoping not too hard, on a couple of poems submitted by our listeners. Hey, Dals.
Sure. What is this? It's no. Zoom's trying to add new AI features.
Oh, great.
Yeah, just what I was hoping for. Sorry, I'm running so late.
No, that's okay.
I appreciate you. Yep, suggesting tonight and setting all this up. It's good to jump on it. I had to cancel a couple things recently, so it's good to actually do. Yeah, good to talk to somebody and good to talk to you in particular.
Too easy.
How's I haven't talked to you in a little bit. You doing all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Sounds like you've been pretty under the weather.
Yeah, I've been useless, but starting to come back around from that.
Well, we won't keep you on too late then.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel better now.
That's good.
And I was excited. I think I'm glad too for you to push me to do to answer Jet. I want to make sure I'm getting the name. It's a J.
Yeah, I think you said it was Jess who asked this question about when it's a good idea, when it's, I don't know how she put it, but like, when do you break the rules, essentially?
Yeah, I have her email here. So yeah, it's Jessica.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And I was realizing like the reason I kept putting off doing an episode on that was that I have a lot of examples, but I couldn't come up with enough examples to cover all the different ways this can, because it's such a good question. There are just dozens of like angles you could take on it. And I could just end up filling up, pages with nothing but examples of things like this. But
yeah, well, that should be really fun Should we
Yeah.
do these poems first and then try to tackle that?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably a good idea.
Okay.
I should also say that in case anybody is antsy, I one of the things I canceled was because I'm trying to alternate. I I had an episode set up to record with Cameron that was a listener credit of different poems, so they're going to be coming slightly out of the order in which they were received. But if you send in a poem and I said I would do it, don't worry, it's coming. It'll just be a little bit wobbled around.
Right. You haven't been skipped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Well, we have two really interesting poems, one by J called Rulers and one by M called O Death. Those are the
Yeah.
ones we're going to look at. And I have a lot more to say about Rulers, and I suspect that you, Matthew, will have more to say about the second one. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was interested in both of these. But yeah, I have a lot of notes on Odeth.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, can I start with Rulers then,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we'll dive into
Let's do it.
M's poem. Okay, so this is Rulers by Jay. I don't have a cold, but I do have hay fever, so we'll just hope there's no sneezing. Rulers. Imagine if, when the aliens come back, all that remains is one of those wooden rulers we used in school, with its sharp edge, its blue smear, and its bite marks. When Glorb gentles a tentacle down to pick it up, looks at it in the radioactive light of Long Island, will he appreciate how the tiny hash marks made small sense of the billowing world for a dead race? Will he shake his orb and pity us for measuring right up to the end, we who renumbered the stars and lost the constellations? Will he, scoffing, feed it to our resurrected mammoths? Glorb, he could care less if an apple is to earth as an atom is to an apple. Glorb loves a gala in the evening, calcium and breathing. The cool green nettle of every equal being together. Pebbles, planets, leaves of grass, all that. Glorb hasn't had a decent birthday party in eons. He wants to shrug it off. They don't matter after 1,000. But the truth is, he's due. What's he doing out here anyway? Alone in the open, so far from the ship.
Does I was trying to think. Does nettle have a secondary meaning? The way I was thinking of, like my in my head, I keep hearing expressions, but I think it's just metal. Then like mettle that I'm thinking of.
Nettle is
Yeah,
either
but you
like a
could.
stingy plant or to like nettle. You can nettle someone, right?
Yeah, okay. So that's
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was. So I'm not real familiar, but that makes sense that there's that you can be used as a verb, which means to irritate someone.
Yeah, like that nettled me.
Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
then a nettle is of course also a plant that yeah, I used to get stung by a lot when I was
Oh.
hiking. Yeah, this is. I mean, it's funny. This is an odd. I was surprised a couple times by this poem. Yeah, I'm curious. What are your? You said you have a lot of thoughts.
Um, yeah, so I read both of these once through and then I went for a walk just to think about them. And this one is working against my particular set of preferences when it comes to writing in general.
Hmm.
Not a speculative girl, like I just want
Okay.
to be here now. That said, it wins me over with its language choices and yeah, just a really nice light tone throughout the whole thing. I think there are some, like, there's nothing hugely wrong with it, but my question is how do we elevate it? Because I think it has good ideas and good language choices, but it risks just ending in a bit of a shrug moment.
Yeah. I mean, my at least at an instinctive level, my the end was my favorite moment. That odd little question about the alien, what's he doing out here anyway, alone in the open, so far from the ship. Um, but I mean, I think I'm with you in that it does feel like maybe an exercise poem. Like it feels almost like it was written just sort of taking a wild, swing. It's, what if you had to include these objects in a poem and a character called this and
Mm.
go for it. And then and then productive and interesting things kind of happened as he went for it.
Yeah.
But as I step back from the poem as a whole, I wonder, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What
What are
game
we
are we
doing
playing?
here?
What are we after? Rulers is a loaded title to
Mm.
suggest, people who are reigning over something as well as these objects. And uh, it's not that those things don't come up in the poem, but it feels like there's a lot that is, as with as with the ruler in the poem, there's a lot in here that gets sort of picked up and then put down again, and I'm not sure
Yes.
what we did with it.
Exactly. That's a great way to put
There's a
it.
lot of potential, right? There's a lot of potential in several of these moves, and I keep thinking like, oh, that could be there's a version of this one that could be this. There's a
Mm.
version of it that could be this other thing, and I kind of wonder, well, what's like, where is Jay's heart at in this poem?
That's
You know?
exactly my question. And I've been thinking about that concept that you introduced maybe a couple of years ago now about a poem needing to be willing to make new allegiances. I know that's not your idea, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
talked about
it's
it. And I love that idea. And I love that as an instruction to keep in mind. But this poem feels like the first four stanzas, the allegiance is to this idea of the ruler measuring, alien coming back to Earth. Then there's a stanza, the fifth stanza, which is about things that Glorb enjoys. And then last stanza and last line, last four lines, we introduce an entirely new idea, which is Glorb needs to have a birthday party, and also why is he out alone in space? So just need to decide precisely, yeah, like you said, where is your heart, Jay? What specifically do you want to talk about? Because if you have a title like Rulers, there's an opportunity to just like look at that word from every single angle in the poem.
right. And it's the title of the poem is the flag you're sailing under. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a poem where there's aliens and there's the end of the human race and there's the distant future and there's also this sort of interesting theme that starts to emerge with the the unity of every equal thing, that whatever this is sort of hinting at, as well as some sort of like broad shticky humor. What is the, like, you have stated that rulers is what we're really getting at here, there's a version of the poem that could be that, and there's a version of the poem that could be like, I thought of I don't know if you know the Danez Smith poem Dinosaurs in the Hood.
No,
um
I should know that,
yeah,
but I don't.
it's a jokey poem where he says like, hey, I want a movie about dinosaurs in the hood, and he narrates it, and he talks about all the different things that do and don't happen, and a pterodactyl takes a shit on a cop's car, and it's a funny poem that also has some pathos and some anger in it at, of course, what is not happening, which is, the poem is about this sort of fantasy of this magical movie, and then of course it's set against the tension of what is actually happening instead. It's not my favorite poem. I don't think it's a perfect poem, but it sort of sets out on a big, self-consciously goofy project,
Mm,
and then I do get a sense that Smith has he knows where his investment is. And I could imagine a version of this that's like, all right, let's commit to, when you name Glorb, when Glorb is where you start, it's efficient in that, like, you let us know right away what game you're playing. But the game you are playing there is one of, yes, we're going to examine aliens doing this,
mm.
but we're not going to take them seriously. We're going to give them a self-consciously silly name that really, what that name sort of suggests is the way humans in a jokey, cartoonish way will sometimes joke about aliens happening. and then you kind of inhabit that person and give him. I also Paul Guest. Paul Guest has a ton of poems about like actually a decent sestina called "The Ghost of Foghorn Leghorn" does something like because like a lot of poems about these sort of cartoons or crazy, like B movie characters or these things. And again, I think it's the question is where are you really where does it set down its root?
Yeah, because if you figure that out, you actually give yourself more room to play. And you can probably then get away with phrases like gentle's a tentacle, which at
Yeah.
this point I think is maybe getting towards distracting. Yeah, if you have a really strong focus, you can get away with a lot more. It's a shame though, because I do think that the end is really strong, and I think maybe that like second to last stanza, which does have a problem in that it starts loves a gala in the evening, which I think is referring to a gala apple, but it sounds like it's talking about a gathering, a
Oh,
dance.
that totally threw me. You're
Yeah,
right. You're
yeah,
exactly
that's
right.
gonna
It's
throw
referring to
more
the type
than,
of apple.
yeah,
Yeah,
through
that
me
makes
as well.
perfect. That makes way, way, way more sense.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
lovely
Lord
stanza
loves a
though.
pink lady in the evening, although that would have
Right,
its own
that's also
problems. Yeah.
yeah, that's what
Right.
I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a really lovely stanza. The cool green nettle of every equal being together. It's really nice. I just don't, yeah, is there a way to keep the best parts of that without losing the thread that you like established so well at the start?
Yeah. So I mean, and I think it's just there are a lot of when I read this poem and thinking about line notes, it's not so much that I'm thinking about what's good or bad, but I think as you note with Gentle's a tentacle, it's more a matter if there's sort of stray marks. Like I think of like a line drawing. If you're doing a really, really simple line drawing
Mm,
where you're just trying to suggest a figure, then you really can't have stray marks. You need like if a mark is there, it's gonna suggest a whole organ, a whole limb, a whole. And so, having small sense, the tiny hash marks made small sense of the billowing world. I think like, well, is that small sense as in not a lot of sense? Like small wonder, like or is that something else? And is there a reason that we're renumbering the stars and losing the constellations? If you're using could care less in a kind of a colloquial way to mean he couldn't care less, but then why is the thing he couldn't care less about if an apple is to Earth as an atom is to an apple? That seems like, well, those are facts that actually do matter. A, you tell us that he likes apples, and B, you tell us that like these are like scientific questions that presumably would matter to an alien re-inhabiting the earth. Like those are not human questions. Those are questions of like biology and chemistry. So
yeah.
yeah,
As you're focusing on that bit, though, I think I'm realizing a bit more what Jay's doing. So that he could care less if an apple is to Earth as an atom is to an apple is also another, it's a comment on measurement, right? And so then Jay takes that idea and starts to talk about apples in the next stanza. Globe loves a gala in the evening. So now I can kind of see the progression, but it's maybe it's too
it's a measure.
subtle.
It's what like a ruler would measure this. So he doesn't need the ruler.
Yeah, he's like
Yeah.
he's beyond all that. He's transcended it in some way. But
But the
no, it's just a
bigness
bit
of
big.
that, like it's a big evocative phrase. It's not just he doesn't care how long a yard is. He doesn't
Mm,
care and if you set if you set up this syllogism with an apple and then Adam, and you're sort of inviting multiple meanings and interpretations, I think it's going to be very hard not to think also the Garden of Eden there.
oh God, yeah, yeah,
Again, it's just a matter of like any one of these could be a really interesting game to play, but it's just sort of right
totally.
now it feels like it's playing all of them.
Yeah, it's like you've got Twister and Monopoly and Backgammon out, and you're sort of like they're all going on at the same time.
Yeah, Leaves of Grass similarly. Like,
Yeah.
so wait, is this Whitman or is this like these phrases aren't good or bad. They're charged with a direction, and then
Hmm.
we don't know which of them we're meant to follow.
I'm probably going to say this a number of times in this episode, but I'm going to quote Josh's phrase from our free verse class, where he and I think another student, she was fucking great. I wish I could remember her name or get back in touch with her. But they came up with this phrase, you can get away with anything if you can get away with it. And this
Yeah.
poem is trying to get away with quite a few different things and not quite getting away with it in every instance. And I think the way you do that is to, yeah, it's hard, right? Because you don't want to bear down on the thing to the point that it falls apart. You don't want to lose its, you don't want to suffocate it. There's
No.
such a risk of doing that, but I do think it needs to keep its focus a bit more. It
I mean, I
sounds so
don't.
stuffy. It sounds so unfun.
No, I mean, you're
Okay.
right and you're also right that like the what's definitely here is a willingness to dance and play across a subject and to
Mm,
pick up and put down a perspective and to kind of to be willing to create this silly figure and then actually invest some emotion in it.
mm.
And those are all wonderful things, and that's why a poem is it's like the sort of things that make a poem be alive and not just shoving some words around on a page. My instinct, and again, I could be wrong, and I had a brief email exchange. This is not somebody I know well. My instinct is that it doesn't feel like a very confident hand in poetry. That this is somebody who has a wonderful imagination and enjoys language and enjoys but it doesn't feel like there's yet a confidence in dealing with language in this particular way. When when you write a poem, it's not that you are constantly doing knock knock jokes, but it is that your language all becomes responsible in a way that it's a little bit different if you're having a conversation with a friend, even if you're writing prose. Part of the game of prose, part of the game of casual conversation is that other forms, either a context or an existing relationship or a subject as identified in the essay, these things help us limit what our words are doing. So that when I write a sentence in prose, you understand that I don't mean every word in terms of all of the things all of those words could mean. We have an agreement about what version of this we're dealing with.
Mm.
And I think with poetry, part of what's wonderful about poetry, but also really frustrating at times when you're kind of dipping your toes into it, is that all of the meanings become live. All of the suggestions become live, and they sort of all are going on at the same time. And so if you want to write a poem that holds together, you need to make sure that it's not that you need to turn not everybody needs to write a James Merrill poem where there's like these, 10th level ingenious puns happening all the time. I find those poems sometimes like unbearable. I often can't stand reading poems like that.
Mm.
Or Greg Williamson is somebody who does that today. And again, genius, but sometimes those poems can be suffocating. But you need to make sure that they're not actively fighting with one another. Right? The
Yeah.
different ways in which the lines and meanings and words and line breaks could point us, right?
Yeah. And this is something that I've really only started to understand very recently from listening to SLEERICKETS, is that all these meanings are live. Like, I think it's an idea that Cameron first unpacked for us in relation to Jeffrey Hill. You hear that in workshops sometimes when people say, "Oh, no, 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 I meant gala as in the apple, not as in
Right.
the dance." And then everyone will go, "Oh, okay, well that's all right then." But actually it isn't. It's not okay.
Yeah.
You have to account for both and all meanings. And
Yeah.
I can definitely hear listeners right now yelling back into their device saying, "No, you don't. That's stupid."
Well, no, but so in my, I think I'm very much a believer in Josh's maxim. You can do anything, you can get away with anything if you can get away with it. I think
Mm.
a version of a similar idea I repeat often in my classes is, if it works, you get to do it.
If it works, you get to do it. Yeah. Hmm.
But the truer point is that there's no get to, there's no have to. There's just what the words are and what effect they have. So ultimately, it doesn't matter whether I tell you or Alice tells you you're allowed to use gala in this way. It's just that when you put gala in the poem in this way, a certain number of readers are going to read it and first think you're talking about a formal dance event. And then a certain number of readers are going to only ever think you're talking about a formal dance event. And a certain number of readers may just intuitively immediately know that you're talking about an apple. But all of those things will be happening among your readers. And you did that. And now you can choose what to do with that information.
Yeah, you just have to account for all of that. You just have to make sure there is no accidental meanings popping out the sides.
I mean, so an example of one that I think, because of the context of the poem, it's pretty safely marked off, although I could be wrong here. Maybe there are other people who had a very different response to this phrase. But in the context of this poem in particular, when I got to sense of the billowing world for a dead race, I, momentarily registered that race has a couple of meanings there. But I didn't, other than, thought like there is some sense of we're measuring, a distance. And so that could be a race that you're running. And there's clearly the race in terms of that we're talking about in terms of the human race. But like no part of me thought this was a poem about racial tensions.
Mm.
Right. So that's an example of like, it's not that every single meaning is some puzzle you have to solve.
Yeah, totally.
It's that you're going to create impressions in your reader with all of the choices you make. And some of those impressions will be stronger than others, and you want to be aware when you're creating an impression that steers your reader away from your intended goal.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. Another example is the line break just before that line. So the end of that stanza reads, "Will he appreciate how the tiny hash marks made stanza break, small sense of the billowing world?" And my expectation when I get to the end of that line is the word by, so how the tiny hash marks made by such and such. So I'm not expecting expecting made small sense, and because of the small, it also interrupts it further, so I'm even more kind of thrown off in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, so we should say this is a poem that is not in meter rhyme, I don't believe, unless I'm missing something.
I don't think so.
But it is broken into visually into tercets, within one standalone line at the end. And I'm with you in that I think that it is not always clear to me that the stanza breaks are helping us read the poem. Sometimes it feels like they are. I'll also say like it is a kind of a like it is a familiar phenomenon in free verse that 3-line stanzas are like a good default, because a 4-line stanza looks like you're announcing form, and if you're not, then it feels odd sometimes. And a big block of prose can be sometimes useful, sometimes not, but like putting a little air in it by breaking the lines into sets of 3 can feel like a good, comfortable default for free verse poetry today. And that's fine, but it may also just be aware that sometimes it just sort of, when you want it to look like a poem and it's in free verse, you can find yourself just defaulting to, let's do 3, sets of 3. And it's worth asking whether that's actually helping the reader follow the poem, or whether it creates odd little hiccups where you have a long pause after you've started the first word of a sentence. Glorb loves a gala in the evening.
Yeah, it's a big stretch. I know that you're on team initial caps.
Oh, for my own purposes.
Yeah. I think it's probably also interrupting meaning in this poem as well. I mean, now I'm just getting seriously nitpicky at this point.
Worth if anyone has not read Marianne Corbett's essay on that, it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah, I need to read that too.
The initial caps source. I have obsessive thoughts about it, but I have no sense of how other people should do it. I just get obsessive about my own use of it.
Yeah, I want to give some practical suggestions about. I feel like all I've done is sort of like pick holes in it. I really want to like give a better sense of how to elevate it, like I said.
I think that so there's a move in the second to last little stanza. I mean, it's, I guess, the last full stanza. Glorb hasn't had a decent birthday party in eons. He wants to shrug it off. They don't matter after 1,000, but the truth is he's due. So the move there, I guess, is we're in a very unfamiliar setting, which is an alien after the fall of the human race is examining the wreckage of the earth. And yet then we impose on that a very quotidian concern, which is birthday parties. And we highlight the transformation of it by, rather than saying, birthdays don't matter after 21 or after whatever number, we substitute in a number that's very alien to us because we don't live to be 1,000 years old. That is a very familiar kind of comic gesture. It also feels like a shticky one, a broad one. It feels like it's doing a bit. It seems. My question is like, does anybody sincerely laugh at that, or do people just sort of nod because they recognize the shape of a joke? And I think if you're writing a poem that has some of the moments of sensitivity and honesty that this poem has, then it's worth being aware that those are, like that's a thing. We know that move. We recognize that like if a preacher said that in church, we would laugh because we would recognize he's making the joke shape, but we don't actually find it funny. And I think like if you're writing a poem like this, I would say you're better than that. Is my instinct. I don't know if that makes sense to you or if that...
No, it does. And actually it helps me because I think that's the note I most want to give is don't let the humor or the jokes distract from the emotional heart of the poem, which I think is an appealing one, an interesting one. It really is a higher wire act, though. If you're going to do both emotion and humor in a poem, if you can do it well, you're seriously pulling something off.
But if it's funny, it will be funny not because you give the alien a silly name, and not because interdimensional conquerors, they're just like us, right? It'll be because we recognize something that takes us off guard. And I would really look at, again, I've referred to it plenty of times on the show before, but it does call to mind Fall of Rome a little bit. There is this sort of slightly, again, it's slightly sitcom-y, like it has a little bit of a Monty Python feel to it, but there's also something deeply depressing and recognizable about the clerk writes on a pink official form, "I do not like my work." And I would really, really look at Paul Guest. His poems. The Donald Duck's Lament is another one. You could argue he hits his own shtick too often, but he has an interesting angle on silly subject matter, or sort of like lowbrow subject matter that has all like sort of been pre-registered as not to be taken seriously. And then he takes it and he puts it into a poem where he does exactly that. He treats it as real, as something that really matters.
Yeah. What we're not saying is shelve this. This is a poem on the way to another poem. This is worth working with.
Yeah. I mean, it also just makes me want to know what Jay is after exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's a version of it, like, again, I can imagine several different versions of this poem. There's part of me that feels like, the thing that happens in Hollywood all the time, which is a really talented young director or writer will get the big break, but his big break is doing, sequel number 4 in some existing shitty franchise. And then you encounter a version where you're like, oh, that was surprisingly well done.
Yeah, why is that
for
so
being
good all of a sudden?
a total why did they bother to make that good? Yeah. You realize it's because like some kid who's actually got some ability said like, okay, I guess I have to make this movie, so let me try to do it interestingly. And it feels a little bit like, which game are you committed to? Again, is I think where I keep coming back to.
Yep. Yep. That's the question. Interested to see where you take it, Jay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we want to look at Odeth?
Yeah. Very interested to hear what you have to say on this.
Sure. I'll read this one. It's called Odeth, and then the note says, after, I don't know how to pronounce this, after Raud Folk Song Index 4933. And I have had some glancing encounter with this. It's like people, anthropologists or literary scholars or whoever did this amazing work of recording all of these thousands and thousands of folk songs and giving them an index and organizing them so that people can find them. And obviously folk songs end up having lots and lots of versions. So it's a way to say, like, okay, where does this come from and what is it linked to and what are the different iterations of it? And there's some version of it is online. I was not skillful enough to navigate it, but there's a ton of these resources are available that, whoever's behind the ROUD, whoever's behind it made a lot of it available online. So it is a terrific historical and literary resource. So this is presumably based on I found a version of this that's very different that's called Odeth that I think is what he's drawing from or they're drawing from, but I'm not sure exactly. So it's Odeth after Raud Folk Index number 4933 by M. 1. Examining blue fingertips. I feel his tearing teeth cut through my flesh. I sense his curling tongue upon my bones. His weathered fingers grope in white skin flush. His rotten arms surround my neck. It burns. 2. O death, you found me, laid out in my bed. You're damned hungry, too. That much is far too clear. What can I get you? Other men? Go feed on them. My sinful peers, that's only fair. 3. Skeleton rattling, death laughs hoarsely. What can you buy me, mortal man? Those other men? A herd of cattle? Rivers, fish? Ha! Hardly. Gnawed bones fill graves. I come right back again. 4. Then my soul is yours. I am your slave. God damn your soul, and it won't matter if you're brave. I wince at black saliva pooling at his lips. And that, the last two little lines there, I wince at black saliva pooling at his lips, are in italics, as are the first two lines, examining blue fingertips. And of course, they do form a tiny, distant couplet.
Yeah. I'll just read out the tiny little description of this particular entry in the index for O Death. The description says, death approaches a young person who is unprepared for eternity. She tries to buy death off. It doesn't work. And death describes how it takes everyone and snuffs out their lives. And then the soon-to-be dead person bids farewell. So it's relatively close to that.
All right. So this is, I saw a different, shorter poem that was called O Death. But yeah,
Okay.
it's a dialogue poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, dialogue with death. Okay. Is it the Partner's Tale that's the three good-for-nothings who are trying to cheat death?
Oh yeah, that sounds very familiar.
It's one of the creepy guys. It's not, it's the, I don't think it's the Sumner. Yeah. It's the Partner's Tale.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like this kind of dialogue, this kind of story is an old tradition of people people trying to bargain with death. I thought of Everyman, the great, I mean, not great, it's significant and very rich and has some great stuff in it, but it is a little bit of it's a folk play. It's a little bit of a mess. The Unquiet Grave. Do you know the Shirley Jackson story, The Demon Lover?
No.
It's really good. And it's a really great oblique adaptation. There's an old, I think, Irish folk song called The Demon Lover that's much more similar to this, where it's a woman who sort of made a deal with a demon or devil. She's basically like she's you know, it's very moralistic. She's lived an impure life, and then this thing comes calling for her later.
Mm-hmm.
But the Shirley Jackson story is just set in the present day. There's nothing overtly supernatural about it, and it's about a woman who feels sure that her fiance has not jilted her. But it's just like it ends up being this like harrowing, like both very funny and very moving story.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I guess the thing to say then, in light of all that, and I'm also thinking of Forbes's Death and Ode, which is just a very fun take on all this. You're entering a pretty rich tradition here, and what are you going to do with that opportunity?
Yeah. So I wondered about this, reading it, examining Blue Fingertips. Yeah, if we're just talking about where each of these lines sort of sets us off, you know, points us as we're going through, because we don't know everything we're going to encounter, so we kind of encounter it in order. Examining Blue Fingertips, my thought is, if you're examining, you're either looking at your own fingertips, or you're looking at the fingertips of somebody you have a special charge over. Either you're examining a dead body because you're a medical examiner, or you're examining a child because you care for that child, or a spouse. But this is not, for instance, what examining suggests is not happening is somebody walking into the room with blue fingertips. Right, because you're not seeing blue fingertips. It's not, you know, a flash of blue fingertips. You're examining. So my assumption is this is the speaker looking at his own fingertips. It's in italics, so we don't know if it's exactly the same voice or not. And then the poem seems to begin with the description of what it feels like when you're dying. I feel his tearing teeth cut through my flesh. I sense his curling tongue upon my bones. His weathered fingers grope in white skin, flush. His rotten arms surround my neck. It burns. So the two questions I had about, well, the three questions. One is meter. So we're doing the first stanza is pretty cleanly 4-3-4-3, 4-3-4-3. No, I'm sorry, not 4-3-4-3. 3-2-3-2, 3-2-3-2. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep. So
wait, is that
pentameter
right?
lines just
teeth,
cut in half.
Yeah. 3-2-3-2. Yeah. And they're rhymed. The second and fourth line rhymes with the sixth and eighth line. In that order. Flesh rhymes with flush, and bones rhymes with burns. 3-2-3-2. After that, the meter gets much more higgledy-piggledy. The three beat lines start to become 2 beat lines. They're not, there's much less of a regular iambic pattern to what's happening. It feels much more like sort of talked out lines that may or may not adhere to a metrical contract. But yeah, I don't think we definitely don't seem to return to anything as regular as the first stanza.
Yeah, but that stanza does set up an expectation. So
you teach us what kind of poem we're reading, and then you depart from that in a way that I don't know. I mean, that's, I guess, what we're going to talk about in the second.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about
part of our conversation. Yeah, it's not clear to me what we gain by having those expectations so thrown off. Even if the first stanza were less regular. Right, like even if the first stanza were just a little bit shaggy and talky the way the rest of them are, then I would feel more at home in like, well, what kind of game are we playing? We're playing a very loose, very folky song lyric game where there's the rough shape of a song stanza, but we're not really getting precious about the lines. It's just that that first stanza is so regular that's what is a little bit confusing.
I mean, the thing is that there are other regular moments in the other stanzas, and that's what makes me wonder whether this would just benefit from just bring all the lines together in iambic pentameter and then just make sure that they all work. So like you're damned hungry too, that much is far too clear, has one too many stresses in it. So you're hungry too, that much is far too clear is I think what you want to go for there.
And when you say iambic pentameter, the way the poem's set on the page, you have the at least in the first stanza, the 3-beat line and then an indentation and the 2-beat line. So you're right. If you were to take those 2 short lines and stack them together, you'd get 5 lines.
Yeah, which I just wonder whether that's how the poem started out, and then the lines were broken, and then it got edited again, and extra stuff crept in. That's my suspicion, but who knows?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah,
it's not clear. So that like just metrically, and then let me think. Do the rhymes keep? I think the rhymes stay fairly consistent. Me hardly is not a strong. Is that no? Hoarsely, hardly.
men again, slave brave.
Yeah. Okay. Hoarsely, hardly is not. Yeah, great. Okay. Slave brave, and then the last one is just a shorter stanza. It's just 4 lines.
I think it's the same problem though, right? Like it's sort of like
Yeah.
like you're kind of stuck in the middle between doing a pretty tight rhyme scheme and then in other places it's too loose, the rhymes are too far apart. So
Yeah.
we don't quite know.
Yeah, and this is again brings us back to the question of what the form is for. So there's in a folk song, some of what happens when you tell a terrifying tale in ballad stanzas or some adapted ballad stanza is that these events become more memorable in the phrasing. They become maybe a little bit of the threat is eased from them, but they're also sort of preserved in this way that sets them slightly apart from normal speech, so slightly apart from normal experience. And the meter and the rhyme also provide a sense of inevitability, so that it makes us hear something as true before we've even thought about whether we think it's true or not. So that kind of regularity can be partly what will seduce the reader into bothering to follow through with a poem that might otherwise seem like, oh, this is too gross. And it can also be part of what makes the darkness of the poem sink home, that we know we already believe it before we want to believe it because it sounds so right when it's set in that form. When the form is a little bit all over the place, again, there's no question about what you're allowed to do. There's just a question of what effect you're having.
Yeah.
And right now the effect is there's I feel confused as to the form, and it isn't clearly delivering one thing or another to me with regard to the lines. It just feels like the form feels like an artifact right now. This was a folk song. There's a kind of a loose folk song-ish, stanza-ish shape here, but it doesn't seem like the poem is, for the most part, especially committed to that shape and those sounds. The other questions I have about the game we're playing at the very beginning. So I was thinking about part of what I found really moving about classical poetry when I first started looking at it as an adult was in Homer, nothing is more potent than Homer on this count, is the sort of stunning literalness of it. Not that there's tons of metaphor and simile, but there's a way in which the Greeks will, in a very unbashful way, describe physical reality. describe the physical conditions that we live in, describe youth and age and beauty and pain and shame and disgust and all of these different experiences in ways that I think if you grew up in a, certainly in America where we're prudish about everything, I think we often are, it can be startling to have things put in sort of plain physical terms. And I think sometimes medieval poetry can have a similar quality to it. There's just something a little bit, it's both what is horrifying and what is sort of bawdy and erotic in Chaucer, is like, well, we're dealing with some really specific physical realities. The woman sticks her ass out of the window when the man's expecting a kiss on her face, and he kisses her, and then the first thing he says is, "A woman hath no beard." Mm-hmm. And it's just sort of, you're kind of confronted with like, well, here's reality. Here's just, this is not an icon or a symbol happening. This is a real physical event in time and space. And so part of what I was thinking reading this was there's something kind of old-fashioned and audacious about dealing, let's deal with what it actually feels like, that when when you're an old person or you're a sick person and you feel death, it's not that you see a man in a dark cloak standing in your doorway. It's that your body feels like deeply wrong. You can feel pain and like something's going on in your body that you don't want to happen and you can't stop it. That's what it feels like when death is, is at your back. Times winged chariots hurrying near. And I appreciate the sort of like the physical literalness of like, okay, here's the actual experience of meeting death. But then I wonder, are we like, are you committing to a specific physical evocation here? Because in that case, I start to wonder about how precisely you've rendered these images. Even like tearing teeth, I think, well, is that helping us in a way that just teeth wouldn't? I feel as teeth cut through my flesh. Does it help us to know that they're tearing teeth? I suspect that maybe a little nod to some of the alliterative shape of an Old English verse. I sense his curling tongue upon my bones. I feel like, that's chilling, but also then what are we imagining exactly? His weathered fingers grope. Like some of these adjectives, I think, weathered fingers and white skin is, and then flush, I think, is a real problem.
Yeah, flush is a huge problem. And also, what's your rule about exclamation marks? Because my rule is never.
Right. They're very, very un-Australian to have exclamation points. I think exclamation points can mark exclamations. The thing to be wary of is that, well, no, but I think that like you can use them whenever you want, but the thing to be wary of is that it's very easy when you put an exclamation point on something in writing, it's very easy for you to basically announce to the reader that this sentence matters a lot to me, and it may matter fuck all to you. And so it can be like the reason I think sometimes we cringe at exclamation points is that they can literally punctuate the degree to which the reader doesn't care.
Yeah, which is what is happening here, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's also happening like it's a flush is a really unfortunate choice for a hashtag rhyme, right? Like you've syntactically divorced this word from the rest of the sentence. We don't have a way in which to understand flush as part of the structure of the sentence. It's just existing in hard juxtaposition to his weathered fingers grope in white skin. Again, it's not my skin, it's white skin. So we're sort of a little bit removed from what are we looking at? And then flush, I assume what we're seeing there is the skin flushing red, I guess. But then I wonder, well, why is it flushing red? And as well as like, well, when your skin flushes red, you don't generally like it's sort of like when people say I blushed. You're like, well, did you? Were you looking in a mirror when you blushed, or did you feel your face get hot? And other people might have noticed that you were blushing. But flush is even worse there because, of course, what immediately comes to mind for me is just like somebody in the next room flushes the toilet. Like that's what I
Right,
thought.
okay.
Like
Yeah.
you're having a bout
That
with
meaning is there
death, and
too.
like somebody in the next
Somebody
room is doing a
flushes.
courtesy flush. You feel like, oh, what game? Like what poem is this? What is the tone here?
So Matthew wouldn't tell you to do this, but I will. You should go and read his poem Anku, which has some really fantastic descriptions of a death-like character. And also just check out a little bit of Death in Paradise Lost. He's pretty awful. Pretty
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a terrifying figure.
Yeah. Yeah, just have I mean, because that's the huge swing and the massive risk that M is taking is like you are walking into like it's hallowed ground. It's very much like this
Yeah, yeah,
territory
yeah,
has been claimed by 1,000 other people. You're literally rewriting a folk song. What are you gonna
yeah,
do? You have to nail it.
yeah. And I think like I'm I'm game for this undertaking, but then
Yes.
I wonder like, well, so are we doing this or not? His rotten arms surround my neck. It burns. Again, like just even it, his arms burn, my neck burns, his rotten
I
arms
don't think
surround
rotting
my neck.
things burn.
That's
Yeah.
the primary thing, Yeah, it just like if you're really going to do the work of saying like, all right, let's get really like unnervingly literal about this, then like actually thoroughly imagine what's happening and render it to us in the order of experience in a way that then makes it feel true. Right now, it feels like there's a little bit of a like cubist simultaneity happening where
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
stacking in a bunch of words that all are related to feeling sick and death and being eaten,
Mm.
and they're all kind of smushed together, but like it doesn't feel like we've tracked a specific human experience from start to finish through this.
Mm. Yeah, what would it be like to actually have an opportunity to yeah, my friend who's a palliative care social worker was over here a couple of weekends ago, and my God, that girl has some stories just about like the
Yeah.
shit that she's seen is just like she comes over and I'm just like, okay, I don't have any real problems. Thank you so much for telling me those stories. They will live in me forever. Yeah. I mean, and I guess M may not be all that enthusiastic about getting super specific, but a little bit like the poem that we just looked at, Rulers by Jay, you you need to take us to the emotional heart of the poem. Somehow. You could do it delicately. You
Yeah.
don't have to be gross. You don't have to be you don't have to be like Homer if you don't want to, but take us there.
Yeah, it feels like we're cranking up the horror. So let's like
Mm.
this feels like the like zooming in on the zombies eating the intestines moment. Like that feels like the game we're playing, but then let's play it. The other thing I think that the Unquiet Grave, again, it's the old poem, but like so good. What it does very very well, and what the other examples that came to mind were Baudelaire has a poem. Well, it's another one of those Paris Spleen prose poems. I think it's called The Real One.
I was going to say
That
anything
is,
from Paris Spleen. Yeah.
yeah, that is an echo of The Unquiet Grave, where a guy goes. Let's see if I can quickly find it because it's really funny.
Cool.
But like that, he has a poem called the Hideous Old Woman or something like this. But the way in which he will deal with physical humiliation or diminishment or suffering, but then unflinchingly set it next to other people's indifference,
Mm.
I think is part of what makes it land so powerfully. And I think what you have to be aware of here, again, like I could imagine a version of this poem where like a guy in the next room does flush the toilet, and like like a great, terrible, horrifying moment. I'm guessing that your friend who works in hospice care has a lot of like really, really like stomach churning stories, a
Yeah,
lot of
and
really sad stories, and a
hilarious.
lot of funny stories too. I'm sure.
Really funny. Like just
Right.
unbelievable. Like this guy is a drug addict. He's dying of cancer. He's also renovating the property that he owns and like talking to the builder. and like not taking his chemo drugs. He's just out there in Melbourne, just like no one can find him. And then occasionally my friend will get a call and it'll be like, oh, yeah, it's Barry's lawyer. Yeah, no, we can't find him. He needs to pay the bill. That like this is shit just so crazy. Anyway,
But yet
yeah,
that's it. Like that's the reality of like that's horror. That's like I'm reading the
horrible.
Denial of Death right now,
Oh,
and
wow, okay.
the it's a lot of it is you do realize like, oh God, we spent way too long in Western culture like allowing Freud to monopolize medicine.
Hmm.
Like there's so like we we spent like decade after decade after decade way past we should have still treating all this like it's science. Like like there's a little
Yeah,
bit of that to it that's like just forget just it's really interesting and insightful, but like stop treating it like it's medicine.
yeah,
But he, you know, like the claim he makes essentially at the beginning is the everyday life that we experience, all of the things that really matter, certainly everything we consider healthy or normal or wholesome about our lives, all of that is wheel spinning denial.
yeah.
And the thing that's waiting underneath the whole time, the actual frank reality is
Hmm.
a horror movie. And so the horror is not added on top of normal life. It's forever waiting just under the surface.
Yeah, William James has this image of human life being ice skaters skating across a frozen lake that is surrounded by cliffs. And the hotter the sun shines, the more tragic the situation is because you're trying not to be aware of the fact that you're about to fall through and drown, always.
Yeah,
And yet it's like so, it's completely obvious at all times.
yeah. And
Anyway,
everybody around you considers it very impolite and honestly a little bit embarrassing for you that you're even mentioning this.
which is
And you haven't
why,
matured enough to learn that you're never supposed to think about it.
yeah, which is why I love catching up with this friend of mine. And we used to work together in cancer care, and she did like bereavement counseling and all this sort of stuff. And I just found it so, there's something so liberating about like having these conversations with her where we just like, I mean, maybe it's wrong, but like we just laugh a lot about some of this stuff. How does any of this help M?
Well,
Great
it's
question.
not. Yeah, it's not like Im is not in denial at all about the horrors of death.
No.
What it feels like the reality that he is not quite acknowledged in this poem is that this also like that all of the horror and high drama that this man is experiencing on his deathbed also is totally corny and boring to you know almost the entire population, including maybe a couple people just like walking right by next door, and like
Mm.
maybe the orderly who's like you know reasonably compassionate enough, but also like his
Mm.
shift's almost over. That this is like one of the things I don't love the play Dr. Faustus. I think it's a very flawed as a piece of dramatic writing, though it is interesting historically. But there is a moment I like a lot where there's a his ticket is almost due, and the devils are going to come drag him through the hell mouth into eternal torment, and he's got like a bunch of dinner guests there, and he just like goes in the next room.
Mm.
It's like they're just sitting having dinner, and it's in the like, and there's even this is like this strange awareness of like the slight embarrassment, like, oh, sorry guys, I've got to go be dragged to hell right now. But like they're just
Yeah.
like their lives are going to go on totally like normal, and it just he has to go through this on his own. So I think that tension doesn't feel like it's quite yet been acknowledged here.
Yeah.
We should move
Look,
on past the first stanza. Sorry, go ahead.
no, well, I was going to jump to the end actually and say the
Yeah,
line
yeah.
that I would fight for is it won't matter if you're brave.
Right.
I mean,
That is
yeah,
the heart.
that's
That's
the
the
heart
heart
of
of the
the poem.
poem. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the heart of the poem, and that's where like I thought of Alcestis, the Euripides play, and just that whole myth. Horace 1:4. I think even in that poem he does say something like, "It doesn't matter if you're brave." And in fact, there's somebody's translation that even has the line. It's either from 1:4 or 4:7. being brave lets no one off the grave. Is that who is
Okay.
that from? Is that Houseman? I can't place it. But
I'm not sure.
yeah, this image of death as being, that I love that moment where then my soul is yours, I am your slave. The final surrender, the final announcement that like, okay, it's then like I will finally go with you. Even that is rejected as like that has I don't fucking care at all about that.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in your soul as a part of like I like that goddamn your soul. I mean, I think goddamn your soul is maybe part of the difficulty with that is that it does feel like there's sort of two versions of that. One is like you've been a sinner and so God will damn your soul.
Mm.
The other version, which by my lights is more chilling to a contemporary reader, is fuck your soul.
Yeah, fuck yourself.
Like I don't
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about that. Throw that in the trash.
Mm.
It's like the ancient Egyptians with the brain. Like we don't have a jar for that shit. That's just some filth. That's like some snot that poured out of your skull. Get rid of that. Yeah. Oh, and then the exchange I'm obsessed with in the Seventh Seal, where he says he finally accepts that he's going to die, and he says to Death, "Soon I will know all of your secrets." And Death's response is, "I have no secrets."
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I mentioned Death in Paradise Lost, who you described so wonderfully in your episode about it. He's just insatiable in true sense of
Yeah.
the word. Like he can't be satisfied ever. God gives him the whole world and he looks at it and goes, it's not going to be enough. I feel hungry just looking at it. I wonder if, just practically speaking, it might even be worth starting with that idea. It won't matter if you're brave. Like just flip it upside down, see how you feel. Like if you start
Yeah.
there, we're very much on the hook with you.
Yeah, there's a part of this that does feel like, yeah, it's saving up. It's like, oh
Yeah.
boy, I've got a really good bit. I'm going to save.
Nah, and
Feels a little bit like
yeah.
we're treading water with some of these lines. There's where like the guy seems to be narrating what we already know,
Hmm.
or he's saying things like, "You're damned hungry too." Like, well, the guy, even like the damned, feels like it reveals how little that line matters.
Yeah, it's just there's just a bit too much run up before
Yeah.
that big
And
jump.
just like obvious wrong answers, like the Oscar Wilde thing, where like secondary characters exist in order to like give main characters opportunities to spike their awesome lines home by
Mm.
saying dumb stuff first that the main character can then whack back at them. So like what can I get you? Other men go feed on like, yeah. It feels like there's either this is like there's a real struggle that's interesting, right? Which is the struggle of Admetus and Alcestis, where he says like he tries to get his parents to die in his place, and they say, "Fuck that! No, we may be old, but we're still alive." Like either that's a real offering, a real threat, a real tension, or cut it. But right now it feels like, well, what is this for? Whose benefit is this for? Go feed on them, my sinful peers. Yeah, and then even again, like it's like it's ghoulish, but it doesn't feel specifically. It doesn't have the physical ring of sick inevitability when you say something like, "Gnawed bones fill graves. I come right back again." That death keeps coming back as part of the horror of death, but what are you saying when you say "gnawed bones fill graves"? You're saying we're running out of graves? We have bones go into a grave. We know bones go into a grave. What is the statement that's being made here?
Mm.
It feels like it's a dismissive statement, but like, what is the logic of its dismissal? Yeah, I think Alice may be right. I think there is something about just
It couldn't hurt, right? Just try it.
yeah, like in his rules for writing fiction, Kurt Vonnegut, one of his rules is start as close to the end as possible.
That is good.
Like save nothing.
Yeah.
Give your readers as much information as quickly as you can.
Yeah, like it's not a burlesque performance, actually.
Yeah.
It's like just get naked as quickly as you can.
Right. No, I think that's right. Right now it seems like there's one little kind of slightly witty nugget of observation about the nature of death that we're given at the very end. And it's not that that doesn't have power. It does have power. But I think the way the poem is set up now, the maximum we can extract from the poem, the maximum value we can extract is the value of that one little nugget.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you decide you're going to give in and surrender, even that is in vain. But I think in a poem about death, I think there's more to discover than you know. I think there's more to discover than M has given himself credit for finding here.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, Em, we probably made you pretty angry, but that can be the best place from which to write a poem. I'll show you fuckers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, I think with the physicality, get physical, but just like really, really be true to the physical experience you're describing. I don't mind, you know, bold, like big, bold statements and exclamation points. I don't mind those sort of like big, intense declarations of truths that are sort of obvious, but that we all pretend politely are not true. But if you're going to do that, you have to also, you can't then be in denial about other people smirking at that. You have to price that in to the over the topness.
yep.
But yeah, I'm interested in this.
Me
Yeah.
too. I think it's a worthwhile project, just like the last one. It's just we're playing on a harder mode.
But I was thinking both of these are sort of like, if like the rules of getting an MFA are the rules of learning how not to embarrass yourself, then like one easy step would be no sci-fi.
Yeah.
No jokey alien speculation, and definitely no dialogue poems, and definitely no poems in which death is personified and is just treated as extremely scary. At most you would have a very wry conversation with a death who's sort of obliquely making some political commentary, but. No, I like that these poems both start out by saying, like, let's make a big, obviously unfashionable choice and then really commit to it.
Yeah.
Right. But then I think you also have to sort of like, you have to be, if you're going to make the big, unfashionable choice, which I love and I'm totally in favor of, then you can't ask people to play by your rules.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You have to bring that, like,
yep.
if you're going to wear, a hoop skirt, you got to still bring it to the party and acknowledge that everybody else is wearing, tube tops.
Yep.
And then still pull it off in that context without, I think of, again, like I've said it many times before, but the David Mamet acting mantra, invent nothing, deny nothing.
So look, I think we did go pretty hard there. Hopefully we didn't do anyone any permanent damage. I really appreciate you sending in your poems. Every time we do this, I learn so much. I know it's not all about me, but hey, I hope other people are learning stuff. I mean, I assume they are. Yeah, thank you so much to Jay and to Em again for being part of this. We really, really appreciate your courage. I also wanted to mention before I go that we are still open for AMA questions. At some point, Matthew, Cameron, Brian, and I will all get on a call together and we will attempt to answer any question you have for us. Be bold, go wild, ask anything you like. I have been watching some movies, but they are too embarrassing to tell you about. I have been essentially applying the equivalent of a hot water bottle to my brain. That's been quite nice. One of the other things I've been doing is taking up an ill-advised podcast project with 3 rat-baggy Gen X theory bros adjacent to the University of Melbourne and surrounds. these guys have been making a show for a number of years called The Barren Field Experience. They wouldn't be offended if I said to you now it was basically unlistenable because of the sound quality, not because what they were saying was bad or uninteresting. It was great and it was very interesting, but like it hurt. It physically hurt. So I said to one of them, hey, do you guys want me to like just record your shit and maybe edit it a bit? And so now that's what I am attempting to do. We made an episode on assassination about a month and a half ago, and just this week we recorded one on nihilism. It's still like borderline unlistenable. I think nihilism sounds a bit better than assassination. I've got a lot to learn. I've basically given myself an impossible task, but I am determined to make it work with these guys who will not stop talking over each other. And also there's a lot of coughing. There's just a lot of coughing, particularly in this last one because they all had colds. They all had the same cold that Matthew had, I think. That's a little side project for me. You will like it if you care about continental philosophy and theory stuff. I mean, honestly, I barely understand what they're saying most of the time. This last one's a lot about Nietzsche, who Justin keeps referring to as Nietzsche. So that's quite fun. Anyway, I think there'll be like exactly 2 people who enjoy it, but those 2 people are going to fucking love it. So yeah, see how you go. In other news, I did not get that job that I applied for that I told you about, that I interviewed for, but by the time they told me, I had decided that I didn't want it anyway. So that worked out, and I have an interview for a job that I know I can do in an area that I have wanted to work for many years tomorrow. So I don't know, like this is not going to come out in time for you to pray for me. Can you pray backwards? Is that possible? I think I know I can do it. I feel like unless I go in there and literally start crying, which is not entirely impossible, then I should be okay. I'll let you know how I go. I mean, yeah, it's just been a long time coming. It's been like a year and a half of being sort of employed but mostly underemployed, and I applied for like 10 residencies. I've sent out something like 120 cold emails to get freelance work. Nothing really came of that, and if I get this job it will have been like one of 24 applications I sent out. Yeah, it's not pretty. What I hate most about it is the people who I talk to about it, because, I mean, first of all, I shouldn't be doing that, but when I just tell people what I'm up to, everybody wants to say, oh, is it because of AI? AI is taking your job. And, like, no, that's not what it is. There are still, like, jobs out there for the work that I do. The problem is that Australia, and specifically the state that I live in, the state of Victoria, is in a fucking recession. Like, a hectic financial slump, and there's like 11% less jobs and 22% more job seekers. And yes, all those job seekers are using ChatGPT to write their cover letters, which really doesn't help things. But it's not just like, it would almost be easier if everyone was like, oh, we just use LLMs now and that they do all our writings. Then I could just like become a masseuse or whatever the fuck. But it's not that. And it's very frustrating when people who literally have never used them and don't know anything about them talk to me like I need to change my career. And it's like, okay, so were you a technology expert? Like in the same way that everyone was a health expert back in the pandemic? Like it's just, it's mind-boggling to me how many opinions people can have about shit they don't understand. I know that's everything all the time, isn't it? I mean, that's what a podcast is, right? That's look, no, we know stuff. We know stuff about poems. And so we stick to poems. That's what we do. Anyway, rant over. Thank you for listening. You can reach Matthew, as always, at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com. And with any luck, we will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.